In his very first solo gig, Thutmose III, a man who would become Egypt's greatest military rock star, smashed a coalition led by the Mitanni Empire at a little town called Megiddo. This wasn't just a battle, it was the start of a new era, putting the entire eastern Mediterranean on notice that there was a new sheriff in town. The account of this infamous battle is considered the first battle recorded in history. The battle was so epic that it helped inspire the word Armageddon and biblical doomsday prophecies made later in history. The whole mess started the moment the formidable Egyptian Queen Hatshepsut vanished from the history books. After 22 years of her steady hand on the tiller, Thutmose III was finally alone on the throne. Seeing a potential power vacuum, a coalition of Canaanite city-states, backed by the heavy-hitting Mitanni Empire and the rulers of Kadesh, decided it was the perfect time to test the new guy. Their rebellion would climax at the walled city of Megiddo, a strategic little spot in modern-day Israel. Sitting pretty on the plain of Esdraelon, Megiddo controlled two vital trade routes, one to the coast and another straight to Kadesh. For Thutmose, on his debut military tour, the pressure was immense. Failure was not an option. According to the massive, not at all subtle propaganda carved into the temple of Thutmose III at Karnak, the young pharaoh rallied his army and marched from the border fortress of Jaru to face this powerful enemy. How many soldiers? The records are but scholars guess we're talking thousands. We also don't know if it was the A-team from Egypt or just local units they picked up on the way. It was a brisk 10-day, 125-mile hike along the Way of Horus to reach Gaza, meaning the troops were clocking a respectable 12.5 miles a day. From there, it was on to Yahim, now just 25 miles from the main event. Here, Thutmose called a meeting with his officers to decide their approach. They had three choices: the northern route through Zefti, the southern pass near Tanakh, or the central route, a dangerously narrow path through the Aruna pass that practically screamed, "Ambush!" The Annals of Thutmose III, another propagandistic masterpiece, details the ensuing debate. His generals, in a moment of perfectly reasonable caution, begged him not to take the Aruna pass. Quote, "Let our victorious lord march by the road he wishes, but let him not oblige us to go by the most perilous route." Thutmose, however, was having none of it. He decided the best way to deal with the trap was to walk right into it, banking on the enemy, thinking he'd never be so bold. To show he meant business, he swore an oath to the sun god Amun-Re, quote, "My majesty will march by this Aruna road." He then doubled down, declaring he would personally lead the charge, quote, "None shall match on this road in front of my majesty." And when the time came, he was right there at the front, to quote again, "showing the way with his own steps." The path was a tactical nightmare, just over 8 miles long and in some places only 30 feet wide, with steep walls perfect for an ambush. There was zero room to maneuver, but Thutmose's gamble paid off. The enemy, assuming no one would be crazy enough to risk it, had only stationed troops on the other two roads. In a single day, Thutmose's army marched through the Aruna Pass completely unopposed, emerging into the Kina Valley to the absolute shock of the enemy forces camped near Megiddo. At dawn the next day, the Egyptians mobilized. They split into 3 divisions, advancing in a crescent formation toward the Asian encampment south of the city. The Karnak inscription paints a glorious picture. Quote, "The southern wing of His Majesty's army was at a hill south of Kina, and the north wing to the northwest in Megiddo, while His Majesty was in their center, Amun protecting his person." This textbook maneuver sent the enemy coalition into a blind panic. They abandoned their tents and sprinted for the safety of Megiddo's walls. This is where Thutmose's troops committed a classic blunder. Instead of chasing down the routing army, they were distracted by all the shiny things left behind in the camp. The chronicles note with a palpable sense of frustration that if the soldiers hadn't been so keen on looting, the victory would have been swift and total. Quote, "When they, the enemy chiefs, saw His Majesty overwhelming them, they fled headlong to Megiddo with terrified faces. Now, if His Majesty's troops had not set their hearts to plundering the possessions of the enemies, they would have captured Megiddo at this moment." Inside the city, defenders frantically lowered clothing to hoist their fleeing commanders over the walls. What should have been a decisive battle devolved into a series of scattered skirmishes while the Egyptians were busy collecting souvenirs. With the enemy now holed up, Thutmose had to settle in for the long haul. Unable to take the city by storm, the Egyptians built fortifications, chopping down nearby trees to create a siege wall. Thutmose understood the stakes, declaring, quote, "Every prince of every northern land is shut up within it. The capture of Megiddo is the capture of 1,000 cities." Finally, after a grueling 7 months, the city gave up. The list of loot was extraordinary. While the official body count was a modest 83 dead and 340 prisoners, likely only counting, the VIPs, the material haul was staggering. The army captured 2,041 horses, 924 chariots, including the solid gold rides of the rulers of Kadesh and Megiddo, 200 sets of armor, and 502 composite bows. These Mesopotamian bows were the high-tech, expensive superweapons of their day. The body armor, made of hardened leather or bronze, was also cutting edge. Interestingly, there's no mention of helmets, even though we know they were in use. The Prince of Megiddo was captured, but the coalition's commander-in-chief, the Prince of Kadesh, somehow managed to slip away. The win of Megiddo cemented Egyptian control over the region and echoed through history. The victory was so profound it inspired literature. Thutmose's top general, Jehudi, became the hero of an Egyptian tale called The Taking of Joppa, where he smuggled soldiers into a city hidden in baskets. Sound familiar? The story predates the Trojan horse by centuries and likely inspired the tale of the Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. Thutmose leveraged the momentum of this victory, launching 16 more campaigns between 1454 and 1437 BC. His strategy was methodical. First, capture key port cities for supply lines. Second, neutralize Kadesh by occupying central Syria. Third, attack the Mitanni Empire directly. And finally, crush any rebellions that dared to pop up. The success of the battle was so resounding that it reshaped regional politics, compelling other major powers like Babylon and the Hittites to recognize Egypt's supremacy through tribute and diplomacy. As one of the earliest battles recorded in extensive, reliable detail, it provides invaluable insight into ancient military strategy and logistics, while its location's legacy as a site of decisive conflict famously echoed into religious texts, with its Hebrew name Har Megiddo forming the basis for the prophetic battle of Armageddon. Even if you account for the self-aggrandizing hype in his official records, the Battle of Megiddo remains one of the best documented conflicts in ancient history. It wasn't just a territorial game. It was the stunning solo debut of one of history's greatest military minds, in history's oldest war story.